Good morning, students. I hope you had a good night rest. Welcome to a new day. So today I'm going to be talking about the cell. I know you have heard me talk about the cell in various topics. What really is the cell? By definition, the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of all living things. You can also say that the cell is the basic structural and functional unit of life. By this, we mean that every living thing, every living organism, everything that has life is made up of cells, at least one cell. Remember, we talked about two different categories of living organisms. We talked about unicellular organisms, which are made up of just one cell, and multicellular organisms, which have two or more cells in them. All right, the basic characteristics of living things are actually the characteristics of the cell. If we say that the cell is the functional unit of all living things, that means the living things get their characteristics from the characteristics of the cell. Now, the very first person to use the word cell goes by the name Robert Hooke, and this was in the year 1665. Robert Hooke was an English scientist who used a crude microscope to view an old oak tree. Now, as he viewed the old oak tree, he saw that there were spaces in this tree surrounded by a cell wall. He called these spaces cellular because they appeared to him like the rooms or cells in a monastery. A monastery is a place occupied by monks, either in the Catholic or Orthodox faith. These men called monks separate themselves from general civilization and go to a secluded place where they go to devote their time and attention to God. Okay, so monks live in a monastery, and Robert Hooke proposed that the cells, because they look like the cellular in a monastery, he called them cells. All right. What Robert Hooke viewed was actually the dead cells or dead cork cells of an oak tree. So he worked with dead material, as it were. The very first man to view a living cell goes by the name Anton van Leeuwenhoek, and this was in the year 1674, where he tried to describe the algae Spirogyra. All right, after that time, quite a number of other scientists took the various work further. They worked step by step on different aspects of the cell and came up with other things. I'll just mention a few things. In the year 1835, Félix Dujardin, a French botanist, called the spaces that Robert Hooke saw, he called them Sarcodi. So those spaces had a name in 1835 called Sarcodi. After that, in the year 1838, a German botanist, Matthias Klein, worked on a thin slice of a living plant and discovered that that plant was made up of cells. In the year 1839, Theodor Schonn, a German zoologist, worked on animals and also discovered that animals are made up of cells. So Matthias Klein and Theodor Schonn together concluded that plants and animals are actually made up of cells. All right. So in the year 1858, Rudolf Virchow, a German pathologist, discovered that new cells actually came from pre-existing cells. That means that for new cells to emerge, they had their root from cells that already existed in the past. And so the conclusion was that there is actually nothing like a new cell, because a new cell evolves from an old cell, a cell that existed before. In this same year, the word Sarcodi was then replaced with the word protoplasm. So all these people worked together and put up what we know as the cell theory today. So the various works give rise to what we call the cell theory.